and welcome to Lincoln to Local. I'm Rachel Havens, and today I've got Steve Thompson here with me from our Public Policy Department. And Steve, this week marks the end of the 2022 legislative session, so let's take a look back at some of the things that we did at the Capitol, especially those that relate to some of our priority issues. I know early on in the session, we faced some legislation that dealt with some county zoning and hazard mitigation. Will you tell our members about that?
That's right. We're just about finished, so it's a good time to take a look back. And early in the year, we were very concerned about some things that came from the Tulsa area that could have had ramifications for all of Oklahoma. And what might work in urban Tulsa certainly doesn't always work in all of rural Oklahoma. And empowering the county commissioners to have zoning authority over unincorporated areas to make smaller decisions on behalf of our producers about how they could raise their animals, or what size fences they would have to have, or what kind of building permits for barns and other type of things, is something our members are very concerned about. And so there were a number of pieces of legislation that we were very involved with early in the year. But it was a good year because I think we were able to express our concerns, and the majority of the legislature agreed with us, and those were able to be put to the side. And some of the things we've dealt with on property taxes for the hazard mitigation funds for counties, the author changed that proposal this year to not ask for more property taxes and got instead a direct appropriation from the General Revenue Fund. And so we feel like that was a victory after previous years of hard work from our team in the field and our members around the state. So those are things that both kind of came from the Tulsa area that are real issues that needed to be discussed, but we feel like that we finally had our voices heard and had a couple of big wins there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know in the same vein, we did see some similar taxation concerns with a county assessor bill dealing with stored hay and grain. Will you tell our members a little bit about our take on that?
That seems to be one constant. We're always going to have concerns about taxes and always have issues we have to work with the county assessor and the Oklahoma Tax Commission. And we had a new wrinkle this year that the counties begin to try to ask our members to list any unmanufactured farm products that they had carried over from year to year, particularly stored hay, grain, other things like that. And so we were able to pass some legislation that removes the authority of the county assessor to ask for you to share that on your personal property taxes. And that was one of the things that went. It was the second to the last bill heard by the House of Representatives before they wound down most of their work last week. So it was a little close for comfort on the schedule, but we were able to get that accomplished. And there's been a number of issues related to county assessors and valuation and how they might use third-party companies. And so we were going to work quite a bit this off-season to try to look at some of those powers and duties of the assessor's office and see what we need to do. And I expect that will be a topic of concern in our policy development throughout the next year.
Definitely. Well, as our members know, we've talked heavily about medical marijuana all throughout this session. Will you give them an update on kind of where we ended up with that?
That was really the dominant issue the entire session, and I know folks are tired of talking about it, but there were so many bills filed. We started with in excess of 120, and throughout the bulk of the session, there were closer to 40 still working their way through and trying to make sure that those were handled appropriately. And then there was a time period where they all appeared to have gone away. And at the end of the day, as we look back, and we're still kind of unpacking what all survived the session, there are probably 6 to 8 reasonable pieces of legislation that we were involved in that passed that we think does move the needle a little bit for safety and property rights in Oklahoma. And we have a mandatory signage law that's ready to take effect so that everybody can know where those operations are at. And related to that, the growing operations will be required to register with the Department of Agriculture as a pesticide-sensitive crop because, as you know, that was a big concern of our members the last number of years. We weren't able to get any kind of liability protections on spray drift, but we're still working through some of those things. There's been a number of increased penalties for illegal sales of marijuana. I know that's been a major concern of not really always just the legal production, but how much maybe black market sales were going on. And so they've put a few more parameters in the law that would increase the penalties for the bad actors. And along with that, they are moving the medical marijuana authority that has primary regulatory responsibility out from underneath the health department so that they can maybe treat this a little bit more seriously as far as inspections and regulation to make sure that truly the bad actors are getting cleaned up. So when you take a look back at that list, and we'll be publishing some of that in the coming weeks, we really feel like that we did make some progress in that area. It was a long and bumpy year, but I think that we finally had some good things happen there there towards the end.
Definitely. I know it's an ongoing issue, but it's good to see the progress that was made. So another thing we had our eye on was some different funding mechanisms to support rural Oklahoma as part of the state budget. Will you tell us kind of what did you see come to fruition on that?
One of our priority issues that came up through the membership last year had to do with large animal veterinarians and a shrinking supply around the state. And we had worked with the Department of Ag to talk about some incentives that they could do to attract and recruit and retain large animal veterinarians. And we weren't able to get funding for that program directly, but through that process, we were able to form a tighter partnership with the Oklahoma State University College of Veterinary Medicine and get some increased funding to them that we think that may be able to increase the output that they have of large animal vets. And so we're tackling the problem a little bit different way, but we really feel like we're making some progress on one of our priority issues there. And another thing that really developed throughout the spring was the worsening drought situation in western Oklahoma. And so we were able to get some money invested in a drought emergency relief fund so that if that continues to worsen throughout the summer, there'll be a little quicker response in some emergency situations. And thankfully, as what normally happens, soon after that was funded, it started raining. And so that's an even better case scenario. So we would take the rain over the money, but we're hopefully covered either direction there.
Oh, that's great. So as session comes to a close, what's next for Oklahoma Farm Bureau in the legislative process?
Well, really two things we shift our focus to quite a bit now. We've been working within our AgPAC structure to conduct meetings around the state and with our state committee and that. And so the election season is very big this year, and so we'll be working very closely with them throughout the summer and fall. And so that's going to be a major focus of ours, as well as the summer leads into our policy development season. And so we'll be researching some of the key issues that were brought up this year and trying to set the stage for August area meetings as well as fall county meetings and resolutions process. So some of the resource materials we'll begin processing right away in June, and hopefully we're ready to kick off another fall meeting season.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Lincoln to Local.